Hey, 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 Bear here. Time for another lecture. This one is on the next project, planning for college expenses, how to save and invest for it. A lot of different options here. And what we're going to do is go through three different presentations on this. Two of those were actually developed by students in the capstone course in the financial planning program, financial plan development, with some edits by me. And then one of them was developed by Merrill Lynch that we'll see. So these slides are derived from various sources. And of course, this is not for use by clients or potential clients, and it's not guaranteed to be correct. Also, some formatting, especially on the Merrill Lynch slides, as I imported them, there's some formatting adjustments that were made. So if there's any errors, be aware that those errors are mine. If any information is out of date, keep that in mind. And always, if you are trying to make some decisions based on this, seek out qualified tax, financial, or estate planning advice. So, here's a presentation from one of my student groups, Foxtrot Investment, choosing the right 529 plan. And this is the most popular choice for saving for college. Basically, it's was put in place about 20 years ago. It's used for any level of education now. In fact, you can use this to fund K through 12 education, private school. It's offered in nearly every state, but the advantages from state to state can vary. Basically, it allows you to put money into an account called a 529 account that grows tax-free as long as it's used for one of these purposes: college education, vocational schools, private school tuition, and that includes books and supplies, computers, internet access, room and board, and any special needs equipment. And also, very recently, you could use up to $10,000 of this to pay off student loans for the beneficiary of the account. If the money is taken out and not used for a qualified distribution, you can leave it in the plan. You can roll it over into another eligible 529 account. You can change the beneficiary on the account. But if you take the money out, it's all of the growth in that is going to be taxed for federal income tax purposes, plus an additional 15% federal tax penalty on the earnings as well. So in that respect, it's kind of like a Roth IRA. All right. There are actually two types of 529 plans. One is this 529, the one that you hear about, college savings plans, the ones that we just reviewed, and the other is a prepaid tuition plan. And prepaid tuition plans don't exist in a lot of states. A lot of states used to have them, but a lot of those states were shut down. And the reason for that is tuition costs were just rising a lot faster than some of the projections were then. So basically, people who were prepaying tuition for the young children made out very well. A lot of those plans, again, have been shut down. There are some private prepaid tuition plans that we'll cover a little bit later. So back to 529 plans, the college savings plans that you put money in and grows tax free and you can use it for college. Here's an example. We have Jessica, 2 months old, lives with parents in Kentucky, and Thomas, who's a month old, lives with parents in Illinois. And these happy grandparents live in Tennessee, and they decide to contribute $5,000 a year to each grandchild's 529 plan. So, some very gratuitous grandparents here. And what should they do? Where should these plans be set up? Well, one of the first things is who's gonna be the custodian of the plan. Basically, one of the ways of setting this up, it could be in the parent's name, where the parent acts as the custodian. If that's the case, then there's an impact on financial aid. If the uh, if the plan is owned by the parent, which would be the case here, 5.64% of those assets will result in a reduction in any financial aid award down the future. If it's owned by a grandparent, however, none of the assets are included for purposes of reducing financial aid. But we also have to take into account the state income tax deduction. In Illinois, there's a state income tax deduction for any contributions to the plan made by Thomas's parents. So up to $20,000 a year in the state of Illinois can be deducted off of their tax return for state income tax purposes. Now, the rate of tax in Illinois is a little bit less than 5%. If you were to look at the benefit of that, it would be somewhere between around $900 or so in terms of a tax savings. Well, that's a pretty important thing. In the state of Kentucky, even though Kentucky has a state income tax for either parents or grandparents, there's no state income tax deduction. And in Illinois, the deduction is only for parents who reside in Illinois. Now, the grandparents here live in Tennessee. Tennessee does not have a state income tax, per se. The tax on interest and dividends in that state is being phased out in 2021. So essentially, we'll have no state income tax. And as a result of that, there's no tax benefit to the grandparents if they make a contribution into a 529 plan in the state of Tennessee or anywhere else for that matter. So another idea is, again, if a 529 college savings plan is reported as a parent asset, it's going to reduce the need-based aid. All right. If the 529 plan is owned by an independent student, someone who basically is not regarded as a dependent, this is rare. This is usually people who've been out on their own for a bit and then go back to college. Okay, it's up to a 20% reduction in aid. But again, if the 529 plan is owned by anybody else, including a grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, or non-custodial parent, which in the case of divorces, for example, it is not reported as an asset on the FAFSA form. But the distributions count as untaxed income to the beneficiary, and that could be monumental in terms of the impact in terms of later awards. So we have to kind of figure this out. What's the best way of doing this? All right. Again, a grandparent-owned plan, any money withdrawn is considered to be income. And there's a couple of ways, if somebody's going to college for 4 years, there's a couple of ways of kind of getting around that. One is the grandparent could wait until after the grandchild graduates to take a 529 plan distribution that is used to pay off a student loan debt up to $10,000. So in that way, none of the income affects financial aid. And if the person is on a 4-year track to graduation, they could wait until after, and they, assuming they went into college in the fall semester, wait until after January 1st of the sophomore year to take a distribution, because FAFSA uses the prior year for income and tax information. So by the time that gets reported, the student will be out of college. And that would probably be another good way. You can use both of those techniques, and that would be a good way of using a 529 plan account owned by a grandparent, which does not affect financial aid in that case. All right? Now, then the question is, well, what 529 plan to choose? All right? We have the Kentucky plan, which is called the Kentucky Education Savings Plan Trust. There's a maximum contribution of $350,000. Of course, that's a huge amount. Minimum contribution, so like on a per month basis, $25 or $15. There's no state income tax benefit again. So even the parents setting this up, there's no tax benefit in the state of Kentucky to them, like in terms of an income tax deduction. But it has narrow investment choices and higher costs, and we'll explore that in just a minute. Now, Utah's plan is commonly used by a lot of people in the United States. It's been around a long time. When 529 plans were originally set up, some insurance companies and broker-dealer firms helped states set these up, and a lot of them were really expensive. And Utah went a different way. It was one of the first plans to partner with Vanguard to get some really low-cost funds, and since then it's also partnered with Dimensional Funds, which is also, in my mind, one of the top fund companies out there. So basically, Utah has a very high contribution limit, gross tax-free, and has a range of investment options that are actually, I think, really good options, and the expense ratios tend to be really low. So we'll take a look at the investment plan in Utah, but you can choose an aggressive schedule. It still has fairly low cost for someone when the beneficiary is between 0 and 3 years old, it's 100% allocated to stocks. But as the person gets older, for example, the 10 to 12 years old, it automatically allocates and becomes more conservative. All right. Then you have Illinois' 529 plan, and there's actually several in Illinois. Basically, it's the direct sold plan, which is not sold through brokers. It's a lower cost plan. The plan in the parent's name, if, for example, the gift could be made to Thomas's parents from the grandparents, they could contribute the $5,000, and they would get a tax deduction for that. That would be worth about 4 to 5% of $5,000, so roughly $225, somewhere in that range. And again, if it's in their name, though, it's going to offset some 5.64% of the assets when financial aid is awarded. Is going to reduce the annual award. So we also have what's called an annual gift tax exclusion. It's $15,000. You can give up to that amount. Each person, so each grandparent could give to each grandchild up to $15,000 a year. There's a lot of money, therefore, that can be put into these plans. That's $30,000 per grandchild at that point, if both grandma and grandpa gift into the plan. You can actually gift more than that, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. There's several different ways of doing that and avoiding gift tax implications. The investment plan for Illinois uses an aggressive portfolio option, and one of the things we ought to do is probably go to this website, Saving for College. It has long been the best website for 529 plans, and one of the things we need to ask is their state income tax deduction, and how expensive is the plan, especially relative to Utah plans. So we'll go to Saving for College and pull that up here. All right, we're going to select our state. So first, let's look at the state of Kentucky plan, just to get charted. Knowing this, we're going to do it for my grandchildren, okay? And my child Bob is 1 year old, so we'll just say newborn, okay? And next, all right, want to learn more. All right, so we'll track that, and got to set up an account. I'm just going to close this out, and I'm going to go down to 529 plans here, choose my state's plan. That way I don't have to register and all that. And then I'm going to go here to state of Kentucky. Click on Kentucky, and it says, hey, we've got different plans here. There's a prepaid tuition plan. Closed to new enrollments back in 2004. So sorry about that. A lot of states again closed those. Kentucky Saves. All right. And then we have something called Stable Kentucky, where they partner with the state of Ohio to do it with lower annual fees than would otherwise be available. All right. So we can actually click on one of these plans. Kentucky Saves. We can look at it. It's not ranked here. The costs are ranked 3.30. We can check on the investment options here. Look at the age-based investment options, and we see a equity index option with fees of 0.52% when it's 100% equity. And we'll just click on that and see if we've got any more information on it. A lot of stocks, foreign stocks, and real estate there. All right. And again, the total expense ratio, 0.52%. And that drops down to 0.39%, my guess is, as it gets more conservative. So, and then these annual fees are based on the initial contribution, 7% rate of return, 18-year holding period, so you can even compare the total fees over a period of time based on certain things. So let's go to another state's plan. Let's go to Illinois. All right. Illinois is pretty interesting. All right. Illinois has Bright Start, which is direct sold plan. It's got a prepaid tuition plan. All right. It's on hold, currently pending discussions to see if they want to strengthen it. So don't know if that will be continued. It has an advisor guided plan, which basically is sold through broker dealer firms, and then it has the ABLE plan through the National ABLE Alliance. Okay, and this is to assist disability related expenses for those who might be disabled. So we'll go here to the Bright Start Direct College Plan. We see that it's got a pretty good score here. Fee score 5 out of 5, performance 4 out of 5. All right, not bad. All right, flexibility, generous state income tax incentives will provide a substantial boost to savings. And we can look at some of the features here. Eligibility, anybody can enroll in it, and Illinois residents can claim a tax deduction for computing their state taxable income. And down here we can see all of the investment options here, and we can also see what the expense ratio is, what's called the annual expense ratio. This is the fees of the funds plus the fees that might be charged by the state of Illinois itself, if there are any. All right, and we can come down and look at, hey, here's an index aggressive age-based portfolio with 0.12% fees. So we could pull that up and get more information about it. And we see that it's U.S. foreign stocks and real estate. No surprise there. Low expense ratio relative to, my guess is the average. And a very low fee over the entire period of time, 18 years, assuming a $1,000 initial contribution and monthly contributions of $100 and a 7% rate of return. So we can see, hey, fees matter. Fees and costs matter when mutual funds are less expensive. Generally speaking, you're going to get better returns. So now, I just want to pull up one more plan, which is state of Utah. I really like the investment choices here in Utah. It's called the My 529 plan, and it's got good ratings. We'll just pull that up, and we can go in here, and it says excellent program for non-residents. Cost really good here, and basically anybody can put it in, and then we come down to the underlying investments: 20 Vanguard mutual funds, 10 dimensional funds, an interest income fund, and we can come back up here and choose investment options, and then look, what is the age based for 0 to 3, and what we find is it's not done. It's not showing up here on the chart. So we would need to go to the plan itself, and we could go down to the plan itself, and somewhere here we could go to the My 529 plan website. All right, and not sure exactly where that is. Let's see down here. Here it is. Oh, no. Here's the website. So we'll pull that up. Whenever you're researching 529 plans, I recommend that you actually go to the website and download information about that, read it, and the like. All right. And here we go. Program description. We'll go to there. And 96-page description here, and asset fee structures, and a whole bunch of information here related to all of this, and deadlines for contributions, how contributions are made, withdrawal rates, and then some portfolios here. All right, now um, operating expense ratio of the global allocation 60/40 portfolio, which is a moderate risk portfolio, 0.25%. That's for dimensional funds. Dimensional uses what's called factor investing a lot, which basically builds upon tilting towards small cap and value stocks and high profitability stocks and what are called low investment stocks. And over a long period of time, there's a substantial probability of outperformance as a result of that. And you can actually see the uh, expense ratios for different age-based investment options here, and the total annual fee, and it's actually really, really low. Not quite as low as Illinois, but because the investment options I think are better, um, I think you're going to do better in terms of using the Illinois plan. So we'll just close out of that, come back to our site. Again, savingforcollege.com. Anybody who is thinking about putting money in a 529 plan should check out this website and check out, when you narrow it down to what plan you're going to use, go and look at those plan documents in more detail and learn more about the plan. Okay, so we'll go on from here. Let's see here. All right, I want to turn to uniform transfer to the minors accounts. That's another option for saving for college. All right, not a very good option though. All right, basically you can set up what's called a UTMA account. All right, now it was adopted in 1986. What was previous to that, it was called the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. And basically, you basically set up an account. It can be done at a bank or a brokerage firm, even a discount brokerage firm, and you can put whatever money into it you want. It's usually up to $15,000 a year without even worrying about gift tax. Above that, there are other types of gift exemptions. You might have to file a gift tax return, but you don't necessarily have to pay any gift tax. And the property becomes the legal property of the minor, but the custodian, that could be you as a parent or a grandparent, has full control until the minor reaches the age of termination. Now, the age of termination varies. In Kentucky, the age of termination is age 18. So minor gets to be age 18, minor gets control of the account, which is one of the reasons this is not used. In other states, however, for example, Texas is 21. If a parent created an account while living in Texas, they would use the Texas, and if they then move to Kentucky, it still has to be a Texas UTMA account. So one of the reasons Uniform Trust for Minors Act accounts are not used very often is because you don't really like to hand over a lot of money to someone when they turn 18 or 21. Yes, college students, that means you too. We don't want you to have a huge amount of money until you really know how to manage it right. And in my experience, until people get into their mid-20s and sometimes later, they really can't handle a lot of money. The other is it has a significant impact upon college aid as well. And on top of that, it does not grow income tax free. It generates income every year that has to be reported on the child's tax return, and the kiddie tax rules also apply to that, which could force taxation at the parent's rate. So, not a lot of benefits of a UTMA account. All right, here's another presentation done by another of my students, more broad in terms of looking at all the options. All right, including the 529 prepaid tuition plans. Again, very useful, but very few states have them anymore. The 529 college savings plans, but we're also going to look at Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, something called Coverdell education savings accounts, Series E and I bonds, using home equity for college savings, and the impact of all of this on financial aid calculations. Again, 529 plans, the savings plans can be used for tuition, room and board, technology items, books and supplies, and basically you open an investment account under one of the state's plans, and if the plan is a parental asset, we have a problem because it does affect financial aid. Independent students owning their 529 the account is assessed at 20%. If it's a dependent student, somebody who's dependent upon the parent, which most 19, 18-year-old college students are, it's still assessed at 5.64%. Okay? Uh, this particular group of students doing this looked at the Ohio plan. They thought very highly of it. Compared to the Utah plan, I tend to prefer the Utah plan, but they prefer the Ohio. There's some other plans out there, New York, Wisconsin, for example, that they were looking at for their particular situation. 529 college savings plans, again, they grow income tax free. So as long as it's a qualified distribution, it's not subject to either state or federal income tax. Again, you need to look at different state plans and figure out if there's a state income tax deduction, is it worth taking? Uh, and then one of the real questions sometimes is, for example, I have clients who were Illinois residents. We took the state income tax deduction. Now the question is, they just moved away from Illinois. Can we transfer that plan to another state? And if so, is there any tax detriment to that? Because we might want to get lower expenses, for example. And then another question is, if it was set up in the parent's name, which is the case here, could we transfer it to the grandparents' names as the custodians? And does that have a tax impact? And actually, every state has different rules on that, so that's why you need to get into the detail of that. Um, Again, prepaid tuition plans, they grow. Basically, you put money in, you get credits at a university. There's no tax for you on that, on the growth of that. But unfortunately, they are not available in most states anymore. All right. So there are some voucher plans out there that are actually sold by colleges instead of the states, and they cover a fixed percentage of tuition. That's an option. I would say the 529 plan is probably better because you don't even know where your child wants to go to college. And nowadays, in terms of financial aid, you're often looking at where are you going to get the best offer from a university at. One university might, even a public university might offer a certain financial aid package. You go to another public university, they offer a different one. So you really need to look at you need to be able to shop around and not lock yourself into one university. Again, well, these are the prepaid tuition plans. Generally, they keep up with the inflation in tuition charges, so it's a very conservative plan, but it cannot be used for room and board. It may not have an absolute guarantee in terms of tuition cost. And you might be not able to transfer it either to different colleges or different states. So let's look at the Roth IRA. Roth IRAs are basically money that you put in, it grows tax free, and after 59 and a half, you can pull the money out tax free. It's basically a retirement account. You When you contribute to the account, you don't get an income tax deduction like you would with a traditional IRA, so it doesn't save you any income taxes up front. But it grows tax free, and you can take the money out income tax free for both federal and state income tax purposes in retirement, as long as it's been at least 5 years since you started that Roth IRA account. Uh, there's a $6,000 contribution limit, so the amount that you can put in there is quite low. Also, if you're working and covered by a qualified retirement plan like a 401k or 403b at work, or your spouse is covered by one, there could be some income limits that affect your ability to contribute to a Roth IRA as well, and the same for traditional IRAs. Um, Roth IRA values are not counted as a financial asset for aid purpose, but withdrawals are counted. So the income, they're counted as income. Uh, for standpoint of using as a college fund, of course, you get the tax-free growth. There's no percent penalty for withdrawal if it's used for higher education. There's no income tax if it's used for higher education. There's flexibility. Um, uh, I'm sorry, if you do pull out the money and use it for college, you do pay taxes on the earnings, even if it's used for college. However, you can pull out what you contributed to a Roth IRA at any time. So, for example, if you put in $6,000 a year for 5 years, you got $30,000 in that plan. It's grown in value to, say, $50,000. you can always take out of a Roth IRA the original 30,000 that you contributed, what is called your cost basis, and that, and use it for really any purpose. Uh, so that would be a way of using a Roth IRA as a college fund to just take out the original without having any tax on it. All right. Traditional IRAs, it says tax-free contributions. Basically, what that means is you get a deduction for federal and state income tax purposes when you make a contribution to a traditional IRA, but the withdrawals, usually in retirement, are taxed at ordinary income. There's a penalty for withdrawals before age 59 and a half. There are exceptions to that. The penalty, again, does not apply if it's used for qualified higher education. You're free to invest in any way you want inside an IRA. Typically, you'll invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, uh, but other investment choices are available to you. And the amount in the account is not used in the financial calculation, but any withdrawals can be. So, again, you're limited in how much you can put into it. That 10% penalty withdrawal, again, is an exception. If you use it for college, there's no penalty, but it's taxed as ordinary income when it comes out, including any. You don't get the same treatment as a Roth IRA where you can withdraw the basis. Any money that comes out of that is going to be taxed as ordinary income. And that income can greatly reduce the financial aid. So a traditional IRA, not probably a great choice from the standpoint of using it for college savings. Uh, Coverdell education savings accounts have been a long time. They've been called different names over time. It offers the tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals as long as you use them for qualified education, and you can use them for K to 12 private school tuition as well. All right. You can't contribute to them if you make too much money in terms of what your adjusted gross income is. The annual contributions cannot exceed $2,000 a year, and it does affect financial aid. And if a non-parent owns the account, 50% of the withdrawals are added to the student's income. That's similar to the rules for a 529 account. Uh, the big problem with Coverdell education accounts is you can't put more than $2,000 a year in them. For that reason, I have never seen a Coverdell education savings account set up for one of my clients or even another person who came to see me. They're just not used very often. Now we have Series CE bonds. You can purchase these. You used to go down to the bank and buy Series CE bonds. Now you do it at a website called Treasury Direct. You can buy them in where they have a $25 face value, the 30 years, so you buy them at a big discount. They grow on a tax-deferred basis, and if you use that interest for qualified education benefits, then there is no federal income tax when it's used. The problem is that if you were to go out and buy Series E bonds right now, the interest rate that you're getting on those bonds is really, really low. So this is not a very good investment at this time. We have what are called I bonds that are basically linked to inflation. At the time this slide was done, 1.9% APY. It's lower now because interest rates have actually fallen quite a bit, and the inflation rate fell a little bit since these slides were done. But basically, these bonds are designed to keep pace with inflation. You get the same benefit if you use these bonds for higher education expenses for federal income tax purposes. They're tax-free. But because of the low rate of return that you would expect, although it's an extremely safe investment, the safest of all investments that we've looked at, the low rate of return, most people are not going to buy I bonds for that. If you, in fact, just rarely would you ever buy an I bond. Now, another thing you could do is basically say, hey, I'm going to tap my equity in my home to help put my kids through school. So if you buy a home, for example, when you start a family and you pay down your mortgage over time, you're going to build up equity, and also the value of your home should increase over time, hopefully. And the result is you will hopefully have some home equity that you could pull out by taking what's called a home equity loan or even taking out a new mortgage. All right. And This is an example. Your house worth $250,000. You put a 20% down payment on it to buy it. Why 20%? To buy a house, you don't need a 20% down payment. Nowadays, you can usually get away with 2 or 3% down payment. But by putting 20% down, you avoid private mortgage insurance, which is 0.85% of the entire balance of the mortgage. Uh, and if you're 2 years into that at 4%, a $200,000 mortgage, you're going to be paying $954, almost $955 a month, and principal and interest payments plus taxes and insurance, and of course maintenance costs and things like that. After 18 years, all right, the home value may have risen to $350,000, all right, and um, if you were to, and the balance of your mortgage would be $94,000. So that $200,000 mortgage, by making 18 years worth of payments, you reduced the amount that's owed to $94,000. You'd be able to tap $255,000 of home equity. Now, you could pay off the mortgage a lot quicker by increasing your monthly payments and have a zero balance by the time the kids get to college. And that would be an option, and it's something I would encourage people to try to do, is to pay off their mortgages early and become debt free. Now, using home equity to save for college is basically a risk free investment when you think about it. If you have a 4% mortgage rate, interest rate on your mortgage, you're guaranteed a 4% rate of return because you're paying off debt. You're saving yourself a huge amount of interest, and that's a really safe investment. The value of the home is not included in financial aid, which is fantastic, and that so you don't have to worry about, like, if you put money into a 529 college savings account and you're the parent, whether that might be counted. All right. So, and this guards against the probability that the kids don't go to college or don't need as much money going to college. What if, for example, a child goes and gets a full ride and you got money in a 529 account? Well, you can use that 529 account for another child, switch the beneficiary, or you could pull the money out and pay income tax and a 10% penalty. That might not be very attractive to you. So, to guard against that possibility, maybe a better way is just to try to pay off your home mortgage earlier and build up equity in your home faster. All right. You don't get as much growth potentially. There's more risk when you invest in a 529 account. You never know where the stock market's going to be 18 years from now and so forth. But those accounts are designed to become less risky as somebody gets closer to college. It is highly likely that you would earn more than 4% in a 529 account, but there's no guarantee of that. Uh, it all depends on how the valuations are when you put the money in, how the economy does, and a whole bunch of other factors in terms of that drives investments rates of return. But I would say it's highly likely, but it's absolutely not certain. Um, Another disadvantage is if you get a mortgage or a home equity loan, that there's some cost associated with that, usually in the range of anywhere from like $1,000 to $4,000 or so. Another big disadvantage is interest rates could be a lot higher in the future. Um, so I remember back in 1980, interest rates on mortgages were 15%. We were in a period of hyperinflation. So for a short period of time, you got a mortgage that was really high interest rate. Uh, Nowadays, mortgage interest rates are around 4%. Some of them are below that, down to around 3%. But you really never know where mortgage interest rates are going to be in the future. But it all depends on how much you have to take out for college in terms of how much interest you might have to pay. Of course, as your child gets close to college, you want to fill out the FAFSA form. The school calculates the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, and that becomes the amount of need-based age eligible. Some institutions use a different financial aid formula for that, uh, but the majority still use this type of calculation. It's always best to shop around the cost of attendance, tuition and fees, room and board, book supplies, transportation, loan fees, and Also, look at the study abroad programs. Studying abroad is one of the best things that a young college student, especially uh, probably at their sophomore year, should could do. And you want to make sure, like at Western Kentucky University, we have a great study abroad program. There are some scholarships available for that for students, and it's certainly something I'd encourage freshmen and sophomores to look into. Again, expected family contribution basically takes into account your family's financial strength and income. For that purposes matters a lot more than assets, because and income to students, when the student is making money, can really reduce the financial aid award. So these students who did put this together basically said, instead of putting all $5,000 a year into a 529 plan, why don't you put $3,000 a year into a 529 plan? We're going to assume that grows over the length of time at 6%, which would probably be a relatively conservative assumption, and the balance at age 18 would be $96,000. The cost of education, for example, at Western Kentucky University, about $20,000, $21,000 a year. Right now, that's about 84,000, 90,000, somewhere in there, for 4 years, assuming room and board and all that. So we're close to that, but the cost 18 years from now will be higher. So we haven't covered all that because the costs will continue to go up, at least with inflation, I would assume. So we need to put more money away than that. They suggested $2,000 into a Roth IRA, invested a little bit more aggressively. It would be grow at 8%. They'd have a balance there, and then be able to pull out after 20 years, pull out that $40,000 that was contributed. There's no income tax on that at all. Yeah. So this just shows the calculations that went into that. Another way of doing that would be to pay down the home balance, basically generate more equity in the home and pay off the mortgage faster as a result. So devote a little bit of this to paying off the mortgage a little bit faster as well. So basically, these students came up with the kind of a mixed solution. I thought it was a very good solution to that. Some money in a 529 college savings plan, some money into a Roth IRA, and some money basically accelerate the pay off the mortgage and build up more home equity. And in that way, if a child does get a substantial financial aid award, then there's less risk in terms of having that money in a 529 plan and not being able to access it without a tax penalty. Uh, at the same time, if they do need some money in college, which most people will do, you got some tax-free growth there, and you got a Roth IRA that you could tap if you need to. On top of that, if you don't, you just use the 529 plan, and you got home equity just in case you need it, additional home equity as well. So I thought that was a very creative solution by this team of students when they put that together. Let's go on, and I'm going to explore. Uh, this is a presentation. It was actually done a few years ago. It's from Merrill Lynch. Um, I found this on the internet, the PowerPoint slides. So I'm not presenting this as a Merrill Lynch advisor. I don't work for Merrill Lynch. I'm just showing you this is the type of presentation that you might hear from a financial advisor, just generally a financial advisor who is going there. And basically, I'll just kind of summarize some of what might be said in the slide. Let's get started. And there's a lot of disclaimers here. The Merrill Lynch and its affiliates and financial advisors don't provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Consult your legal or tax advisors before making any financial decisions. Investments are not FDIC insured, not bank guaranteed, may lose value because Merrill Lynch is part of Bank of America. They have to have that disclosure. And they focus on what are your life priorities? Family, giving, work, home, leisure, health, finances. We affect all of those different priorities. And how do you help fund your children's or grandchildren's education? And why is that important? Well, we know that people who earn a bachelor's degrees, for example, make over the course of their lifetime a lot more money $20,000 more a year on average. Of course, it varies tremendously. This is, again, my words. This varies tremendously from the standpoint of what major you're in. Business majors tend to do pretty well. And which grows faster, your children or your college costs? Cost of college have risen dramatically over the last uh, 18 to 20 years, and uh, that unfortunately that might continue to go up as we see reduced state aid for education, especially because of the coronavirus. States will probably have to cut their budgets again, and that might force tuitions up a little bit, at least in the next year or two. I hope that doesn't happen, but certainly the tuition and other costs will rise at least equal to a rate of inflation, I would say. So this presentation, they're going to discuss sources of financing, tax advantage education vehicles, how it affects financial aid calculations, estate planning strategies, and other resources that are available. And this shows basically how the average family pays for college. 32% of the cost of college comes from parent income and savings. This is overall, generally for all people. 30% from grants and scholarships, 16% from student borrowing, 11% from student income and savings, 6% from parent borrowing, and 5% from other relatives and friends. So, grants and scholarships, of course, typically do not require payment, like the Pell Grant and the scholarships that you get from Western Kentucky University. I hope many of you got those. And borrowing, save, you got to pay things back when you get those loans, and paying back loans, it can be hard because you're doing that typically with after-tax dollars. Um, Loans, some student loans are not bad in terms of their repayment options. There are some private student loans that have less repayment options. I'll just kind of skip over this. Then they get into the different types of accounts again. Section 529 accounts, Coverdell education accounts, and the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account. And they go through all of them. I'm just going to go through this presentation very quickly. Not going to share with you what a financial advisor would say, because we've already covered it. All right. And a 529 plan provides this tax advantaged way to invest for the future, make contributions for it. It grows tax free as long as it's used for qualified expenses of either K through 12 or college. All right. And this presentation is a few years old, so they didn't have the K through 12 in here at the time because the law changed. Basically, earnings withdrawn and not used for higher education are subject to taxes. We now can use them for K through 12 and also for repaying student loans as well. And Coverdell education accounts, a little thing, again, the contributions are limited to $2,000 per beneficiary. That means because of the very low amount, they're not used very much. And then you have the Uniform Transfers to Minors account. And the problem with that, you can't change the beneficiary, so you don't have the flexibility of a 529 account. You don't have, also as part of that, you don't have tax-free growth in the account. You have basically there is tax on the interest, dividends, and capital gains in those accounts every year. Section here on how to evaluate Section 529 plans. Does your home state offer any state tax advantages? Take that into account. What is the range of investment options? What is the cost of those as well? All right. And then figure out the impact on financial aid. All right. And the UTMA accounts treated as an asset of the beneficiary, weighted at 20% of the effective family contribution, so not generally a good thing. Coverdell education accounts and 529 accounts, if the parent is the custodian of those accounts, then they are typically weighted at 5.6%. 529 accounts, if the grandparent is the custodian, then not included as part of the asset base for that expected family contribution portfolio, but withdrawals again are used to pay for college, can be counted as income for FAFSA purposes. So again, wait until somebody's graduated from college and use it to pay off the student loan, or wait until the middle of their sophomore year if they're going to be on track to graduate in 4 years, January 1st of that year. And then by the time, because FAFSA forms look back 2 years in terms of what income is, they look at the tax returns, you can uh, not have those withdrawals counted. There are some special gifting rules for 529 plan accounts because you can give $15,000 a year on the annual gift tax exclusion. An individual can actually gift 5 years of $15,000 contributions uh, in advance. So they say, if those grandparents, for example, said, I've got $150,000, I'm going to set aside this money for this grandchild. They could do that. $75,000 each. It's 5 times 15,000. Put all the money in. All right. Now they do have to file a gift tax return when they do that, but there's no gift tax pay. They just need to show how it's allocated, and they wouldn't be able to make direct gifts for the next 5 years. So although the following year after they make that gift, they could make another $15,000 gift into a 529 account. Of course, that's a lot of money in a 529 account at that point. So so basically, there are some estate tax benefits of this. If a married couple is worth more than $22 million nowadays, they might be subject to estate taxes if both of them die. There might be some benefits to giving away money to reduce the size of the estate tax. And again, this takes a goals-based approach and has different resources, including some books out there. These are a little bit dated, and the law has changed. A couple tax law changes have occurred, so you really have to keep things in line. And again, savingforcollege.com I think is the best resource of this. Um, and they also list some informational financial aid resources there, and questions and answers. So that's the end of this presentation. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're doing well at home and surviving all this coronavirus threat, and you're staying safe. And if you do go out, you're maintaining social distancing and you're washing your hands frequently. And if you have to go to the grocery store, you're doing that at a very less crowded time. And when you get home and unpack everything, you wash your hands carefully, and of course maintain social distancing. And if you are working in one of those essential businesses, hopefully you'll wear some type of face mask if you're dealing with people, and be safe, and hopefully you and your family are safe. So, oh my, these things always have awkward endings, don't they?